What's the biggest bullet you've ever dodged? I broke my lease and moved out of a terrible apartment complex I was living in to move back home because I was broke. 2 weeks later the whole complex burned to the ground from a meth lab in another unit. I have a similar one. I broke a lease to move home due to being broke. During the course of that lease there were multiple murders and break-ins all throughout the complex. My apartment was on the first floor, so easy break-in. 2005. My friend and I evacuated New Orleans 2 days before Hurricane Katrina and drove to Mississippi with the little money we had. We were trying to decide on where to stay for the night, and it was between a mid-range hotel or the really cheap motel. Decided to spend a little more for the hotel. During the night the eye of the storm came through Mississippi and flattened the roof of the motel we decided against. My mom wasn't going to leave for Katrina. I told her I was going to take me and my little sister and hitchhike if she didn't pack the car and leave within the hour. My dad didn't leave and he ended up on the roof with our neighbor because our house got flooded. No way all of us would have survived. Katrina decimated my town. Everything 2 miles inland or less was destroyed. This was my first ever experience dealing with a hurricane since I'm from the Midwest and was in New Orleans for college. Hope you and your family are all safe and doing well now. I was booked on Pan Am Flight 103 which went down over Lockerbie, Scotland. I didn't have a premonition or anything supernatural. I just decided to cancel my seat. Didn't think anything of it until the plane went down and my mother had written down my flight plan and reminded me. This was back in the day when you could cancel without a penalty up to a couple of days in advance. Pro tip. To avoid the few days away cancellation fees, call or go online and reschedule the flight for a week or 2 out. Then wait a day and cancel. Thanks for the tip. Finishing up my paper route when I was a kid. Walking home on the sidewalk next to a busy road with sister on the inside. Me dragging our little buggy on the outside. Middle of winter. Car jumps the curb and takes out our buggy. Neither of us know what the hell had just happened other than the ungodly scraping sound and that our buggy was gone. Find out later that the driver saw us run home scared and brought back our buggy which was utterly destroyed in a crumpled heap. I was pulling the cart and my hand was on it, so I'm not sure how I avoided eating chrome that day. Not a single scratch on me. I still think about it regularly and it's been over 30 years. Kind of similar. 2000-ish friend and I got some root beers from a store and were walking home. Car jumped the curb, shot across the grass and past the sidewalk and came within inches of hitting me. When the car got back onto the next street over, an old man got out of the car and appeared to be having issues with his legs. Friend and I just continued on our way back to his house, where we told his dad, who said something to the effect of, "I'm going to have to teach you boys how to cross a street safely." I didn't think too much of it until later in life, when I realized A, I didn't do anything wrong. I was 15 feet from the street on the sidewalk, and B, I could have died / seriously injured if the driver was a few more inches to the right. My ex-girlfriend moved out of my house a day before the first lockdown in Spain. She previously pulled a knife on me. Dude, thank God. That time I didn't go along for the ride when a friend of mine was running weed years ago, back when it was more illegal. I was bored and unemployed at the time, and passed on this trip because I had to go to a job interview to be a zombie for Halloween festivities at an amusement park. I got the job. My friend got arrested and did 30 days in jail. That sounds like an awesome job. Jail isn't all it's cracked up to be. I had 2 job offers in different states at the same time. The one I didn't take was offering more money, but I just didn't gel with the guy who would be my boss, and really liked the guy who would be my boss at the lower offer. The better offer was in a state I had always wanted to live in, for a company I admired, but something felt off, so I went with the lower offer. I ended up meeting my wife in the city of the lower offer. Meanwhile, the company that had given me the higher offer abruptly closed and laid off their entire staff with no severance. So if I had taken that I would have been stuck on the other side of the country with no job and no money. Similar story. 2 offers. One for a little more money. The other had way better retirement plan. The interview for the good benefits company just didn't feel right. Like the interviewer was trying to convince me not to take it. I took the other offer, and the good benefits company merged with another company, moved half their workforce to a 1-company town in BFE, Ohio, and laid off the rest. My interviewer at that company ended up becoming my coworker at the other company, and his manager ended up being his and my manager at the other company. I worked with a guy who had a higher offer at another company in the same city, both in Houston, but he thought it all just seemed too good to be true. So, even though it offered more money and perks, he stuck by his spidey sense and took the lower paying passed on the job with Enron. Had a friend who asked if I wanted to move to CA with him and his family. I was 16 and thought it sounded fun. I didn't know at the time, but he was actually rescuing me from my insane mother and a not so happy home life. When you are abused, sometimes it is hard to know you are abused until you become an adult and gain a perspective. I shudder to think what would have happened to me if I had stayed there. That's interesting. Can you elaborate on the situation, if you don't mind? Like, were you close with them that they'd be okay to live with them in their same house? And if so, are you still close with them? If you don't mind. I only knew him for a year, but we became best friends. It was a weird situation. I only met the parents once before I moved out there with them. I was initially supposed to stay just for the summer, but I was told that I could stay longer if I wanted. I think this gave us both an out if things didn't work out. I ended up finishing my last year of high school living with them and stayed until I was 21. The father has since passed, but I'm still in touch with my friend. I didn't really find out that they were rescuing me until way later, when the mother told me that my friend told her about my home life to convince her to let me move in. I had no idea at the time. Lol. I was supposed to hang out with a couple of friends one night. We were going to go to a party that we were all invited to the weekend before. I asked to get off work early so I could go to the party. My manager let me go early, so I went to go find my friends. But I had a really bad feeling all day and it just kept getting worse. Instead of turning left to go to my friend's house, I went right and went home. I found out a few weeks later that they got busted with cocaine in their car. They were 16 and 17 at the time. I was 18. So I would have been screwed. When I was 19, all of my friends decided to take a last-minute trip to Canada. I was at work and, even though we were dead, my boss refused to let me leave early so I could go. I was super pissed and was texting my friend pretty consistently until she just stopped answering. I didn't hear from for a couple of days, and then she called me to tell me what happened in Canada. Someone forgot they had mace in their purse, and upon Canadian authorities searching their bags, found said mace. They were all detained and strip searched. The girl's father had to pay a $500 fine before they could be released. To this day, I have never been happier to have had such a bitch of a boss. Is mace illegal in Canada? I was at the Tacoma Mall when the Tacoma Mall shooting happened, walking right towards where the gunman opened fire, when my then fiancé decided to go back into a store we were just in. No speak. The time it took us to get back to the store was the same amount of time it would taken to be right where it all broke out. 10 seconds one direction or 10 seconds in the other. Hearing the screams and gunshots echoing in the mall was crazy. They locked us in the Suncoast video store for a while before having us exit out the back. Undefined. I had run into a person I worked with at the time about 10 minutes before the shooting. I think he went back to Masses and we went to the Suncoast. We were Christmas shopping. The mall was pretty busy. It came down to my fiancé remembering she wanted to get someone a series of Friends DVDs. So we headed back. Just as we were a few feet from the store, the first cluster of shots rang off, and there was this shared confusion as to WTF was happening. My first thought was gang violence or something. It's Tacoma after all. Because it sounded like several people firing at once echoes. If something like this happened today, I'd think potential mass shooter right away. But then it wasn't so much a thing. We had to yell at several women who were still looking around outside the store, confused, telling them to shelter inside, waving them in. My memory might be off, but it felt like maybe 20 to 30 of us crammed in the Suncoast, them having put the metal gate down and locking it. So we are all in there, just listening to the gunshots and screaming, wondering what was happening. As time went on and the shooting continued, it seemed less likely to be some gang thing as they'd get the F out. So I and others started saying we need to exit the store. He cold shot through the metal gate, us fish in a barrel. I was spared from seeing anyone who was shot. The coworker I had seen just prior was not so lucky, as he was around several who got hit. It understandably really affected him. He was this tough truck driver dude who doesn't take speep from anyone. When I saw him, and we talked about it, he started how much pain one person is capable of inflicting. I think about this day a lot. Being spiritual and not religious, I feel like God spared us that day. I'm sorry to hear about others who were adversely impacted by that day. My dad's buddy was one of the people shot at the Tacoma Mall. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year later as a result of his injury. What an awful event. I'm glad you're okay.